Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Storytime with Uncle Monkey. I am your Uncle Monkey, and today's story is called The Golden Bird. In olden days there lived a king who had a beautiful pleasure grounds in the back of his palace. In them was a tree that bore golden apples. When the apples grew ripe, they were counted, but on the very next morning one was missing. This was reported to the king, who ordered a watch to be kept below the tree every night. The king had 3 sons, the eldest of whom was sent out into the garden as night was falling. But when midnight came, he couldn't help but fall asleep, and the next morning another apple was missing. The following night the second son had to stand guard, but he had no better luck. Now it was the third son's turn to be vigilant, and he was ready and willing, but the king didn't have much confidence in him. However, he gave him permission to go. And so the young man lay down under the tree, stayed awake, and didn't let sleep overpower him. At the stroke of 12, in the moonlight he saw flying toward him a bird whose plumage was all shiny with gold. The bird alighted on the tree. The young man shot an arrow at it. The bird flew away, but the arrow had hit its plumage, and one of its golden feathers flew down. The young man picked it up, brought it to the king the next morning, and told him what he had seen that night. The king convened a council, and everyone declared that the feather was more valuable than the entire kingdom. "If the feather is that precious," the king stated, "I have no use for just one. I want and must have the entire bird." The eldest son set out, relying on his shrewdness and certain that he'd soon find the golden bird. He saw a fox sitting at the edge of the forest. He leveled his gun and took aim. The fox called, "Don't shoot me, and in return I'll give you some good advice. You're on your way to the Golden Bird, and this evening you'll arrive in a village where there are 2 inns opposite each other. One is brightly lit, and the people in it are merry. Don't go into that one, but into the other, even if you don't like the looks of it." "How could such a foolish animal possibly give me some sensible advice?" the prince thought, and he pulled the trigger, but missed the fox, who stretched out his tail and quickly ran into the woods. Then the prince resumed his journey, and in the evening he reached the village with the 2 inns. In one of them there was singing and dancing, whereas the other looked poverty-stricken and dreary. "I'll surely be a fool to go to the run-down inn and pass the nice one by." So he entered the merry one, where he lived a wild life and forgot all about the bird, his father, and every good principle. After some time had gone by, and the eldest son still hadn't come home, the second son set out in search of the golden bird. Like his elder brother, he met the fox, who gave him the same good advice. Arrived at the 2 inns, and his brother was standing at the window of one from which the joyous noise was issuing, and called to him. He couldn't resist, and went in and lived only for his pleasures. Another while went by, and the youngest son wanted to set out and test his luck, but his father wouldn't allow it. "It's no use," he said. "He's even less likely to find the golden bird than his brothers were, and if he meets with misfortune, he'll be helpless. He's not too bright. Nyah." But finally, when the lad gave him no peace, he let him go. Once again the fox was sitting just outside the forest. He pleaded for his life and offered good advice. The young man was good-natured and said, "Be calm, little fox. I won't hurt you." "You won't be sorry," the fox replied, "and in order to travel more quickly, climb onto my tail." No sooner had the youth sat down on it than the fox began to run. They dashed over stocks and stones, and the lad's hair whistled in the wind. When they reached the village, the young man got off, followed the good advice of the fox. He just went straight to the humble inn, where he spent the night peacefully. When he stepped out into the countryside of the following morning, the fox was already sitting there and said, "Keep going straight ahead, and eventually you'll reach a palace in front of which a whole troop of soldiers will be sleeping. Don't worry about them because they will sleep soundly. Then go through all the rooms. You'll finally reach a chamber in which the golden bird is hidden. It's hanging in a wooden cage, but right next to it, there's an empty golden cage that's just for show.
But take care not to remove the golden bird from the plain cage and put it in the flashy one, or else things will go badly with you."
After saying this, the fox extended its tail again, and the prince sat down on it. Then they dashed over stocks and stones, and the lad's hair whistled in the wind. When he reached the palace, he found everything as the fox had described. The prince entered the chamber in which the golden bird sat in a wooden cage, with a golden one beside it, and the 3 golden apples were lying here and there in the room. Then he thought it would be ridiculous to let the beautiful bird remain in the cheap, ugly cage. He opened the door, seized it, and put it in the golden one. But at that moment the bird uttered a piercing cry. The soldiers awoke, dashed in, and led him off to jail. The next morning he was brought before the court, and, since he confessed to everything, being an honest fellow, he was sentenced to death. But the king said he would spare his life on one condition: if he brought him the golden horse that ran even more swiftly than the wind. If he did that, he would receive the golden bird as a reward. The prince set out, but sighing and sadly, for where was he to find a golden horse? Then he suddenly saw his old friend the fox sitting by the roadside.
"See,"
the fox said,
"it turned out this way because you wouldn't listen to me. But buck up, I'll look after you, and I'll tell you where to get the golden horse. You must continue going straight ahead and you'll reach a palace where the horse is in the stable. In front of the stable will be the grooms, but they'll be lying asleep, and they won't wake up when you walk past them. But you must remember one thing. Put the simple wooden and leather saddle on it, and not the golden one that's hanging next to it, or else things will go badly for you."
Then the fox extended his tail, and the prince sat down on it, and they dashed over stocks and stones, and the lad's hair whistled in the wind. Everything was just as the fox had said. They arrived at the stable in which the golden horse was kept. But as he was about to put the plain saddle on it, a thought hit the youngest prince. "A beautiful beast like this one will be dishonored if I don't fit it with the good saddle that it deserves." But scarcely had the golden saddle touched the horse's back when it began neighing loudly. The grooms awoke, seized the young man, and threw him in jail. The next morning he was tried and sentenced to death, but the king promised to spare his life and make him a present of the golden horse if he could bring him the beautiful princess from the golden palace. Heavy at heart, the young prince set out, but to his good fortune he soon found the faithful fox.
"I really ought to abandon you to your bad luck, but I feel sorry for you, and I'm willing to help you out of your trouble yet again. Your path will lead you straight to the golden palace. You'll get there in the evening, and at night, when all is quiet, the beautiful princess will go to the bathhouse to bathe. When she enters it, run over to her and give her a kiss. Then she'll follow you, and you can lead her away with you. Only don't allow her to say goodbye to her parents first, or else things will go badly for you."
Then the fox extended his tail, the prince sat down, and they dashed over stocks and stones, and the lad's hair whistled in the wind. When they arrived at the golden palace, it was just as the fox had said. He waited till midnight, when everyone was fast asleep, and the beautiful maiden went out to the bathhouse. Then he jumped out of hiding and gave her a kiss. She said she would gladly go with him, but begged him with tears and sobs to allow her to say goodbye to her parents before leaving. He told her to get dressed and that she couldn't say goodbye to her parents. At first he resisted her tears, but when she cried harder and harder and knelt down before him and begged, he finally gave in. But scarcely had the maiden walked over to her father's bed when he and everyone else in the palace woke up, and the young man was arrested and put in jail. The following morning the king said to him,
"You have forfeited your life, and the only way you can find mercy is to remove that mountain that blocks my view in front of my windows. You must complete this task within 8 days. If you're successful, you shall have my daughter as a reward. But if not..."
The prince began. He dug and shoveled without let up, but after 7 days he saw how little he had accomplished, all his work amounting to almost nothing. He became despondent and gave up all hope. On the evening of the 7th day, however, the fox appeared and said,
You don't deserve my taking you by the hand, but just go lie down and sleep. I'll do the work for you.
The next morning when he awoke and looked out the window, the mountain had disappeared. Overjoyed, the young man hastened to the king and reported that he had met his terms, and whether he wanted to or not, the king had to keep his word and give him his daughter. Now the two set out together, and before very long the faithful fox came to them.
Yes, yes, now you have the best thing of all, but the golden horse belongs to the maiden from the golden palace.
How can I acquire it? The young man asked.
I'll tell you, the fox replied. First, take the beautiful maiden to the king who sent you to the golden palace. They'll be deliriously happy, and they'll gladly give you the golden horse, and will lead it out to you. Mount it immediately, and shake everyone's hand, but leave the maiden till last. When you shake her hand, pull her up onto the horse in one tug, and ride away fast. No one will be able to overtake you because the horse is faster than the wind.
All this was successfully accomplished, and the prince led the beautiful maiden away on the golden horse. The fox didn't remain behind. He said to the young man,
Now I'll also help you get the golden bird. When you're close to the palace where the bird is kept, let the maiden dismount, and I'll keep watch over her. Ride the golden horse into the palace courtyard. At the sight of it, everyone will be happy, and they'll bring out the golden bird for you. As soon as you have the cage in your hand, dash back and fetch us.
When the plan had worked out well, the prince was about to ride home with his treasures. The fox said,
Now you must reward me for my assistance.
What do you want for it?
When we reach the forest there, shoot me and cut off my head and paws.
That really wouldn't be expressing my gratitude. I can't possibly grant you that request.
If you won't do it, I must leave you. But before I go, I'll give you one more piece of advice. Be on your guard against two things. 1, don't buy any gallows bait. And 2, don't sit down on the rim of any well.
Having said that, the fox ran into the forest. The young man thought, He's a peculiar animal with odd fancies. Who's going to buy gallows bait? And the urge to sit down on the rim of a well is one that's never ever come over me yet. He continued riding with the beautiful maiden, and his path took him once more through the village in which the two brothers had remained. A big, noisy crowd was gathered there, and when he asked what was going on, he was told that 2 people were to be hanged. When he got closer, he saw that they were his brothers who had committed all sorts of nasty offenses and had lost all their possessions. He asked if there was any way to release them. If you're willing to pay what they owe, the people replied, but why would you want to throw away your money and ransom on such good-for-nothing's gallows bait? Yet he didn't hesitate for a moment. He paid their debts, and when they were released, they all continued on their journey together. They arrived at the forest where the fox had first met them, and since it was cool and refreshing there on that hot sunny day, the 2 brothers suggested that they rest a while and have something to eat or drink. He agreed, and during their conversation he forgot what he had been told. The youngest brother sat down on the rim of the well, suspecting nothing wrong. But his 2 brothers threw him backwards into the well, took the maiden and the horse and the bird, and headed home to their father. They were so proud that they were not only bringing the father the golden bird, but also the golden horse and the beautiful maiden from the golden palace. The people were overjoyed, but the horse refused to eat, the bird refused to whistle, and the maiden sat and wept. The youngest brother hadn't been killed, however. Luckily, the well was dry and he fell onto the soft moss and was unharmed, but he couldn't get out. In this emergency, too, the faithful fox didn't abandon him, but came dashing by and scolded him for forgetting his advice.
But I can't just let things go, he said. I'll help you up into the daylight again.
He told him to grab his tail and hold on tight, and the fox pulled him right out.
You're not completely out of danger yet. Your brothers weren't sure you were dead, and they've posted guards all around the forest with orders to kill you if you showed your face.
Just then they noticed a poor man that was sitting by the side of the road. The young prince and the poor man exchanged clothes, and in that fashion the young prince reached his father's court. No one recognized him, but the bird suddenly began to whistle, the horse began to eat, and the beautiful maiden ceased weeping. The king asked in astonishment, "What does this mean?" And the maiden said, "I don't know, but I was so sad, and now I'm so happy. I feel as if my true bridegroom has returned." Then she told the king everything that had occurred, even though the other brothers had threatened to kill her if she revealed anything. The king had everyone in his palace brought before him, and the youth came too, dressed as a poor man in his ragged clothes. But the maiden recognized him instantly and hugged him. The wicked brothers were seized and executed, whereas the young man was married to the maiden and named the king's heir. But what became of the poor fox? A long time afterward, the prince entered the forest again. There he met the fox, who said,
"Now you have everything you could wish for, but there's no end in sight to my unhappiness, even though you have the power to deliver me."
And once again he begged him tearfully to shoot him, cut off his head and paws. So the young prince did it, and scarcely was it done than the fox turned into a man, who was none other than the beautiful princess's brother, finally released from the evil spell he had been put under. And now nothing else was needed to make them all happy for the rest of their lives. The end.